Hello, Jeffrey here from NBots. Today I'm going to go over my 3-pounder Death Wobble. This is a post-event review for Cirque 2018. We didn't do that great, but I didn't really expect to do that great. There's a couple things that went really well and a couple things that went really bad. So I'm going to go over my robot here and show you the damage and show you kind of what's up here. And I'm a little curious to see how the needle bearings did, because I haven't opened this up yet. Death Wobble is a 3-pounder robot. It has a vertical disc spinner. It was originally set up to be a vertical or a horizontal. It's got nuts in here, and this unbolts with a couple screws, which I'll unbolt it here in a minute. And then this rotates, and then this rotates, and they come together, which I'll show you that. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it because I didn't have space for my power switch on the inside, so it bolts to this side, and so there wasn't room. I designed this in about a week because I was running out of time. The robot itself had some very unfortunate matching. My first match was against Siege Engine, which was a kit spinner with a custom frame, and I was able to disable that one. Luckily it spun, this spun, and my second match was against Icky Mouse. So that's what all this is from. This is all Icky Mouse. This is printed out of Onyx. It's the minimum fill setting, or this is the minimum fill setting, and this is the standard default fill setting. The reason for that is that I was running out of filament, but despite that, it actually held up quite well. I mean, this is all, I mean, there's a little bit of play there, which I don't necessarily consider a bad thing. And this spins quite freely. The problem that this robot had was, I got a couple of chunks missing out of here. The problem that this robot had was that this doesn't spin up very well. So I originally had purchased a speed controller for this robot, and unfortunately for me, it did not get here in time. And so I had to use a different speed controller, which does not have a slow ramp. So to spin this up, I had to hunt and peck with the throttle until I found the sweet spot. I only actually got it spun up one time, and that was for a very impressive match that I had against Phantom 2. You can find that in the Cirque 2018 list, and I'll actually link it below because it's a pretty cool match. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this apart and see how messed up everything in here is, because I really have no idea. It seems good, but I'm a little skeptical that it's not going to be as good. So I don't really care about marring the shaft because this isn't going to compete again. It's just going to go together as a mock-up, I think. So this is a aluminum standoff that's got it's got a hole going all the way through, and it's tapped 832 on both sides. It seems, despite the several big hits that I got, that it did not deform, which is surprising. I thought this was going to bend in half and that was going to be the end of it. So moving on, well, Nothing fell out. That's a good start. Bearing looks like it's in reasonably good shape. Ooh, that's that needs to change. Oh yeah, you can see in there it's this side seems okay. So couple of impressions right off the get-go. I printed both hubs, which I'll get to that one in a minute. I printed this hub out of this is onyx as well, and it's bolted to this, and then it has a boss that goes through, and then the I have a needle bearing pressed in there. It's a 1/2 inch by 3/8 needle bearing, and I think the needle bearing held up quite well. And this is MXL belt I bought from McMaster Car, which also held up quite well. I only had one belt for the whole match. Well, for all 3 matches. This one went 1 win, 2 losses, and was in the Beetle Rumble as well. Clearly I need to have some form of bearing surface on this. I want to go with a larger bearing so that I can mate it together better. This surface seemed to hold up much better, so maybe having a taller boss on this side that's smaller might work out better, because that's like almost polished. This ain't going nowhere. That held up really well. This is AR 400, weighs 1/3 of a pound, and you might notice it's not round, not even close. So what happened is the water jet that was used, the part shifted while it was cutting out, and so this side was really heavy, and I had to grind this down so that it was balanced. And all I did is I basically held this up, and then jiggle it. See, it's still unbalanced. It's still heavy on this side right here, but it's close enough. It spins up pretty good when it spins up, which that's a speed controller thing. So that worked great. I'm happy with this. Next time, it's definitely going to have less of a spinner on it. One second, let me grab the other set of keys. Of course, everything has to be metric and imperial. So for the electronics, oh yeah, Icky Mouse actually nicked my wire, so I had to just put a quick patch in there. I had some Captain over it. This isn't going back together, so I'm just cutting the wires. So there's my ill-fated, really old 25 amp speed controller, which performed okay. So this was powered by DESC, one of my new ones, which worked great. Lemon RX, and I already covered that. 2 GA25 motors. These are the same 800 RPM ones that were in Commander Cupcake, and my custom power switch. I don't know if you can hear that, but that's completely that's dead. And then I got yeah. the rumble wasn't too kind to us. And then I got my Nanotech 1 amp battery. This is a 3-cell. I'm probably going to go to a smaller battery, or possibly 2 small batteries. So the next thing I'm going to do actually is, so if you look in here, I've got 4 screws that hold the whole thing together. Okay, so unfortunately, because of the constraints that I had with the robot, I wasn't able to use my horizontal configuration, but it would have looked something like that. I don't think it would have driven very well, but it certainly would have been interesting. I may, when my speed controller gets in, which it still hasn't arrived yet at this point, almost a week later, but when it gets here, I think I'm going to do some testing on it. It actually goes this way, believe it or not. Although the holes are there, so it could mount either way. But there's no clearance for the speed controller wires. So I may do some test driving if I can find a good spot to test it. So I really like the idea of being modular. I could have, if I had had time, I could make like a drum spinner attachment or a like a wedge attachment or whatever. So this held up really well. I think that the next version is going to have aluminum plates on either side and then a big standoff and some big bolts, so that this will be riding up against aluminum instead of plastic, which will help solve this. And then I think it's a small one here. Is that the right one? Nope. Next size up. So this bit's probably the most innovative out of the whole robot. The way that I did this, I haven't seen anyone else do this method, and I think, I won't know until I get it apart, I think it worked really, really well. I made my clearances for this way too tight, so the belt actually, you have to take the motor off. That's stupid. I need to fix that. So if I take my motor out through my tiny hole in the side, like I said, the way I designed that was kind of silly. The belt comes out and that leaves you with the frame piece. So this is how I did my motor. And that's it. Prop drive 28, 26, 1200 kV, 2-to-1 ratio, MXL belts. And that's just 3D printed. There's no glue or anything. I just popped that sucker in there. And my theory is that, see, I can turn this, but just barely. So it did wear a little bit. So my guess is that this would be a replaceable part. The more matches you have, the more it would clutch. But, I mean, I'm holding this tight and I can barely turn it. Yeah, I can barely turn it right now. So this is perfect for transmitting power, but if I have too big of a hit, it'll just shift a little bit. And then eventually this will wear out and you'll have to replace it. But this is cheap. This is like $1, even in Onyx. because this is just standard infill. So that worked really well. I'm really happy with the way that came out. For transmitting power, I don't have any complicated gear setup, where it's hanging off the shaft. Everything's in line with the bell, so it's riding on the bearings that are inside of this, and then, with the belt wrapped around it. That worked really well, so I'm happy with that. Future versions will do this. I may even do an ant weight with the same style. So the blade, I did take some damage on it. Let's see if I can find it. I used the term damage lightly. That right there is from Phantom 2, when they hit me. And then this right here was from when I hit them. Best I can figure. Because that wasn't on there before the match. This stuff is hard. So you can see it's kind of like dingy and rusty. I actually hit this with a DA sander with rough grit, and it didn't even scratch it. So I ordered this from McMaster-Carr, and then had it water jetted at a local company. So that's about it. I mean, this robot's deceptively simple for what it is. It's literally a couple of pulleys, and then a standoff, a couple of fender washers. These were Loctited, that's why they're still stuck together. I used the green Loctite. So I had a couple of standoffs holding that to a plate, belt onto the motor, and that's it. And I'll probably do a video later detailing how I designed this and how I got the belt distance right. Basically, it's just using an online calculator to tell you the distance. Yeah, there's quite a few things that went well with this robot and quite a few things that didn't. I think that I'm going to develop both a vertical and a horizontal spinner kit for NBots. I haven't started on it yet, but I'm going to use this as a basis. It's going to have less mass in the blade because this was just crazy. It was undrivable once it spun up. But I think it could be a pretty decent kit, so I'm going to investigate that a little bit further, and I'll take you guys around for the journey. So hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for watching.